the 71st sequel, where Apolo Kaggwa exhumed the remains of the Nsenene ancestors, his own ancestors and those of others, in Busujju, 1906. The Lukiiko was so incensed that they had to vote and pass a vote of no confidence in him, but he was protected by the British Protectorate. Welcome, the author Christopher Amos Chikomeko Ntambi, the Church of Uganda at 150 years, a celebration of our church and our history. I will begin with the biodata of Sir Apolo Kaggwa. It is the only way that we can get to the bottom of this incident of 1906. Apolo Kaggwa was born in 1865. His parents, his father was Kaddu Kijara of Senge in Busiro County. Senge is today found here near Wakiso, Kayunga Wakiso, on Hoima Road. His mother was called Nambi Ndimoreza of Bulemezi. Now, they gave birth to Apolo Kaggwa and they gave him the names Kaggwa, Kalibara, Kinarwa, Guremie, Bikongolo. The parents of Kaddu Kijara, who belonged to the Nsenene clan, was Senteza Kamunyi Kiyenje. Senteza Kamunyi Kiyenje is remembered for being the prime minister or the premier of the tomb or royal tombs of Semakokiro at Kisimbiri. And in turn, Senteza Kamunyi Kiyenje was the son of the great Bunya. And for us to understand Bunya, we have to go back to the reign of Ssekabaka Kamaanya. Ssekabaka Kamaanya belonged to the Nsenene clan, or his maternal family was of the Nsenene clan, and since the Kabakas identify themselves with their maternal clans, so Ssekabaka Kamaanya was identifiable or belonged or was of the Nsenene clan. And therefore, during his regime, he looked out for his own amongst the Nsenene clan. And he found one Bunya, who he appointed to be the county chief of Bulemezi. And therefore, Bunya used his influence and position to stay on in power, even when Suna II, as a young man, took over from his father, Ssekabaka Kamaanya. Ssekabaka Suna II is the one who executed. He killed Bunya. And he did not just kill him. Bunya had made a terrible offense. And therefore he was found guilty and executed. And his body, therefore, was never given a decent funeral. So it has no grave. Bunya's son were in positions. For example, I've just mentioned that Senteza Kamunyi Kiyenje, the grandfather of Apolo Kaggwa, was prime minister of premier of the shrines of Semakokiro at Kisimbiri. This is in Busiro also, just after Kayunga or Wakiso, on this Hoima Road. The other children of Bunya included Kiza Chironde, who had been the Chimbugwe. Now, the Chimbugwe are ex-county chiefs of Bururi, but he had since been promoted during Suna II's reign to become Pokino, and that is the county chief of Buddu County. Unfortunately, Senteza Kamunyi Kiyenje also made some adultery offenses, and he was executed by Suna II, and he was buried at his ancestral grounds in Busujju. Therefore, Kaddu Kijara is somebody we can say that is the parent of Apolo Kaggwa, but without, or who had lost both his grandfather and his father. Apolo Kaggwa or the other children of Kaddu Mukasa Kijara included Ibrahim Ruminsa Basudde, Mutekanga, and a girl, Goisa. Whereas Kaddu Mukasa Kijara was also not born alone. Senteza Kamunyi Kiyenje gave birth to almost 30 children, brothers of Kaddu Mukasa Kijara. But those from the same mother were only 3. Kaddu Mukasa Kijara, Tezira Nassaza, and Isaiah Batambogwe. Or Batambogwe. Apolo Kaggwa, as a young boy, was raised from his maternal family in Bulemezi. And this was at a village called Kabengereddwa, near Karasa in Deje in Bulemezi. And this Apolo Kaggwa, as a boy, is remembered to have suffered terribly from the epidemic that befell the kingdom in the early 1860s and 70s, 1870s and 1860s as a child. And so he was a victim. I think it was smallpox, but he survived, but with a lot of scars. He had, when smallpox attacks, he leaves terrible scars on people. Narongo, the mother of Sir Apolo Kaggwa, was also a daughter to Sarongo Kijoma. Sarongo Kijoma was in Kabengereddwa, and that is basically where Apolo Kaggwa grew up. And at the age of 13, they brought him to his father at Senge. These maternal parents of Apolo Kaggwa brought Apolo Kaggwa to Senge at the age of 13. Now remember, in those years, the chieftainencies, the enclosures of the chiefs were the schools, so it was time for school. And his brother, Ibrahim Ruminsa Basudde, was a chief at Senge. And at the age of 13, we are basically talking about the year 1879, the year in which the Roman Catholic missionaries arrived here. And so Basudde, who was a local chief at Senge, sneaked his own young brother to the bigger palace at the palaces of Mutesa, which included Lubaga, which included Kasubi, Nabulagala, Kasubi, which is also called Nabulagala, and other palaces. He sneaked him there, and he became the keeper of the mosque. And later on, he became assistant chief cashier for the Kabaka, and later on, cashier for the Kabaka. And therefore, basically, that is the Apolo Kaggwa. The reason I am mentioning this is the fact that there are many historians who say that he was brought as a young boy from Busoga. I just wanted to clarify that no, there is clear evidence in the book of Nsenene clan that his parentage and the graves of his grandparents and parents are known, and they are around. His father is buried at Senge. And in this audio video, I'm even trying to show you where the grave is and how it looks like at Senge. That is where he's buried. Kiza Kironde, the other brother of Apolo Kaggwa's father, is also buried at Senge, but on a separate graveyard. Senteza Kamunyi is buried in Busujju, or was buried in Busujju. Apolo Kaggwa himself is buried at Manyangwa. So I just wanted to clarify that he's not a young man who was smuggled in or brought in from Busoga, as many writers would prefer to say. and I will very soon arrive at the reason why many writers think that that is the situation. I also must mention here that in 1882, Apolo Kaggwa, who had earlier on begun studying Christianity at the Natete Church Missionary Society station, there he learned how to read, he learned how to write, he learned numeracy, he learned Christianity, and in 1882 he was baptized by the Reverend Ashe, who gave him the name Apolo. So he became Apolo Kaggwa Kalibala Kinarwa Guremye Bikongolo. As you can see, the name Arthur does not belong to Apolo Kaggwa. I am very aware that when you are starting to drive from around Bwaise and you start that Apolo Kaggwa road, there is a signpost by Kampala City Council which reads Arthur Apolo Kaggwa. It reads Sir Arthur Apolo Kaggwa. I just want to clarify that Apolo Kaggwa was not Arthur at any one time in his life, before his life, or even after his life. And I can speak about that with authority, having already told you earlier, or if I haven't, let me declare it now, that Apolo Kaggwa is my maternal grandfather. Is my maternal great grandfather, not grandfather, but great grandfather on the maternal side. And therefore I do speak with authority about the fact that the name Arthur does not belong to my great father. I now want to introduce you to the year 1906, where there was a clan leadership quarrel between the head of the Nsenene clan, Kajubi, and a lineage leader called Kalibala. Apolo Kaggwa told the Nsenene clan leadership that Kajubi was not the rightful leader of the Nsenene clan, and that instead his own lineage leader, Kalibala, was the true leader of the entire clan of Nsenene. He therefore went ahead and installed Kalibala as the head of the Nsenene clan and deposed or dethroned Kajubi from that seat. And that meant that he had to be deposed or exiled from Chadondo or Busiro or Busujju, and he exiled him to Buddu. Now, this, in order for this to happen, it meant that the heads of the clans had to accept this change, including the Kabaka. Now, the Kabaka being so young and Apolo Kaggwa being so powerful, these changes were effected. However, there was a famous case. I want to call it a notorious case. The notorious Kajubi case of 1906. This case was brought against Apolo Kaggwa, in which he was accused of exhuming the bones of his ancestors from the Busujju graveyard. So what did he do? Apparently, Apolo Kaggwa went to Busujju, his Nsenene ancestral graveyard, where his own grandfather, Kamunye Kiyenje, had been buried, and he exhumed the bones of his ancestors. Why? Because he felt that some of them did not belong to that particular graveyard, and that they had to be either transferred to Voodoo, or, as some people allege, that he wanted to throw them into Lake Wamala. This now is in Mityana, near Mityana. However, there is no evidence, there is no written evidence about him proposing or trying to throw the bones into, but the evidence that is there is that he actually exhumed these bones. He wanted these bones to be buried elsewhere. This angered Kajubi very much, and Kajubi insulted Apolo Kaggwa within the Kisekwa court, and he insulted him that if anything he was not a Muganda, that he had come from Busoga. Now this insult was very new to the ears of everybody. It was the first time that it was being uttered, and it was being uttered by a very important person and leader of the clan, Kajubi. From that day onwards, people started referring to Apolo Kaggwa as a Musoga, as a Nani Muganda. And the ancestral people were very, very angry at Apolo Kaggwa for exhuming the remains of his own ancestors. As a matter of fact, there was one Masembe who was a Mutaka within the Nsenene clan who announced that because of that act, Apolo Kaggwa was to be expelled from the Nsenene clan. And it's recorded by some historians that, as a matter of fact, Apolo Kaggwa was expelled from the Nsenene clan for some good time. But that expulsion was never got the royal approval, because you see, these things were the Kabaka being on top of all the top of the Kisekwa court. He had to give assent to such things, and that the Kabaka never gave. So yes, the court made the pronouncement, but it could not be effected because it did not have royal assent. When the bones were exhumed, the ancestors ran to the Kisekwa court. They reported Apolo Kaggwa. Of course, the Kisekwa court disagreed with Apolo Kaggwa that it was not right for him to exhume the bones. Therefore, the case went to the Lukiiko. The Lukiiko was also very, very angry with Apolo Kaggwa, so angry that they passed a vote of no confidence in him. Apolo Kaggwa tried to run to the district commissioner Buganda. He was called Mr. Stanley Tompkins. But he was also very angry at Apolo Kaggwa for exhuming his ancestors. He sided with the Lukiiko. He sided with the families of the ancestors. He sided with the Nsenene clan leadership against what Apolo Kaggwa had done. Therefore, the Lukiiko passed a resolution ordering Apolo Kaggwa to rebury the bones. So Apolo Kaggwa had no alternative but to rebury the bones of his ancestors, which he had exhumed. That is the written history available. For those who argue that no, the bones were actually taken by Apolo Kaggwa and thrown into Lake Wamara, that allegation is a hatred allegation which has no proof in the records I have found, the correspondences I have found for the Kisekwa court as filed in the Uganda National Archives in the files that are marked Apolo Kaggwa. It's a whole folder with so many sub-files and documents, both in handwriting and in typed texts. And for the handwritten one, somebody had to translate for me. I couldn't read Apolo Kaggwa's handwriting. And so from those correspondences, that is what happened. Apolo Kaggwa reburied his ancestors in Busujju. Now, there is also correspondence that Apolo Kaggwa was trying to claim the entire Busujju area under Milo land for his claims. Remember the 1900 agreement and that style of claiming areas, and then you get a certificate, and then the land is demarcated, and then it's allocated to you, and then finally you get a land title. So he was trying to get Busujju, but again, that didn't work out according to the documents. And some writers were alleging, and these are very respectful historians, that the reason why Apolo Kaggwa was exhuming the ancestors was because he had now claimed this land, and therefore because it was now his personal land, he was getting rid of his ancestors. Now, you see, that doesn't make sense. It really doesn't make sense. The truth is that he was contesting the lineage ownership or leadership. He wanted Kalibala and his lineage to be the people allowed to bury there. So everybody who was not in that lineage within the Nsenene clan, he exhumed, and he wanted to give the bones to Kajubi so that Kajubi could take them to Buddu when he was being deported there. He actually went to Buddu, he left Busujju, and Kalibala was installed in Busujju. That did not change. That happened, but the only thing that was reversed was the exhumed bones. They were reburied at Busujju. And so, that is the famous 1906 notorious Kajubi case against Sir Apolo Kaggwa. From that time to this very day, the insult of Apolo Kaggwa being a Musoga remains. I'm very surprised historians write with authority how he is a Musoga, completely ignoring what the Nsenene clan lineage book has written about his ancestry. It's as if he cannot produce his parents. It's as if he cannot produce his grandparents. It's as if he has no siblings. It's as if he has no uncles. It's as if he cannot show graveyards of those people, and yet he can. And that's why I've taken the trouble to actually do this sequel and show you the spot where his father is buried, where his grandfather is also buried. The only person who has no grave is his great-great-grandfather, Bunya, who was also a Muganda by virtue of the fact that he had been appointed a chief of Belemezi County, only to be killed by a cruel Kabaka Suna, and of course his own grandfather, Saint Zakamunyi Kiyenje, here at Kisimbiri as the premier of the Semakokiro tombs. Now, surely, how would all these uncles of his end up in such big positions if they were not really people who could identify themselves with Buganda? And therefore, the story that they brought a very young boy and sneaked him into the palace cannot hold water. And this day has been completely erased from the books that have been comfortably writing about Apolo Kaggwa as a non-Muganda. He was the son of Kaddo Mukasa Kijara, the grandson of Sendeza Kamunyi Kiyenje, the great son of Wunya, who has no grave, having been executed by Sekabaka Suna II. And that is our sequel 71. May the good Lord bless us all.